African American Women in Linguistic Practices, researched and presented by Katie Bierbauer, Brittany Middlebrook, and Michael Wiersma. As Coates, among other authors such as Grace Evans, Carla Scott, and Denise Troutman points out, little research has been done regarding women's discourse in single-sex groups. More specifically, little research has been done regarding African American women's discourse. This is a problem because people will presumably continue to judge the discourse of African American women based on stereotypes without understanding why African American women speak in a certain manner. Our aim, therefore, is to try and uncover and analyze some of the practices of African American women in discourse. The purpose of this study is to examine the linguistic practices of African American women within our focus group. From this, we can shed some light on some of the ways African American women use discourse in constructing their identities. The main focus of this study will be how African American women use simultaneous speech and whether or not it is used in constructing their identities. We will also look at other ways African American women construct their identities, such as through gender and politeness. Our research questions for this study include: in what ways does gender, race, and social class impact and affect identity, especially through simultaneous speech? More so, basically, do these participants in our research construct identity through simultaneous speech? If so, how do these participants construct their identity, especially through simultaneous speech? And, if not, how do these participants construct their identity? In what ways does gender, race, social class impact and affect their identity? Our thesis then is this. We found that the participants in our study constructed identity through a sociolinguistic frame of context, specifically through the use of using simultaneous speech, while also marking or indexing the importance of gender and politeness within discursive constructions of identity. This video will explain female African American linguistic practices for the analysis of the physical characteristics and demographics of our participants, the context of the interview itself, and the topic development during the interview. We will start with literature review. The works of authors such as Grace Evans, Carla Scott, and Denise Troutman have taught us that African American women do construct identity through discourse. Grace Evans, for example, writes from a black woman's standpoint in examination of loud black girls. Evans is prideful of these girls, recognizing that using their voices is a means for them to be heard and not to be silenced. It seems that it is a way for African American women to both remember their history and their background, as well as pay respect to it. By speaking in such a loud manner, they are reminding themselves of the oppression and struggles they have had to overcome, as well as the ones they continue to face. By maintaining their voices, they are standing up to the white-based superiority society that we are a part of. Denise Troutman has also written of African American women's discourse. She has written that the use of body language, culturally toned diminutives, playing the dozens, signifying, and smart talk are characteristics of African American women's speech communities and as a means of constructing identity. Furthermore, Carla Scott has written of African American women in speech, recognizing that it is restrictive to members of the same community since it is viewed as deviant from the standard. African American women are therefore quite conscious of their speech patterns. When they engage in natural speech, they are affirming their solidarity with other African American women and therefore constructing identity. We have seen examples of these characteristics in the readings from Lito Saletti and Mills. To test the theories posed by the previously stated authors, we conducted our own interview. The setting for our interview and the conversation we recorded was a small Starbucks in a Midwestern state where the participants live. We sat in a small circle with the chairs fairly close together so we could better hear each other and understand one another above the dull roar of the coffee shop. Our participants happily sipped their coffee and chatted with us for about 15 minutes starting around 10:50 a.m. on Monday, April 15th, 2013. The participants of this study also resided in a Midwestern state where they also work as servers. The two women are of African American descent, they are middle class, and aged in their early 20s to their early 30s. The two participants have known one another during a period of 4 years as co-workers. They seem to see their occupation as part of constructing their identity. A lot of the examples given during their interview, such as those of politeness and impoliteness, were in terms of their occupational setting. The fact that these participants interact with a wide demographic on a day-to-day basis has helped shape their identity. We asked the two participants to select pseudonyms. Their self-selected pseudonyms may be another site for examining identity construction. One of the participants chose to be Nicki Minaj, and the other chose to be Beyoncé. The fact that these two women chose two prominent African American women within the music industry may index that the participants see themselves as possessing the same sorts of traits or characteristics that these well-known artists possess. The participants in the study could have chosen random, anonymous names, but the fact that they chose Beyoncé and Nicki Minaj seems to communicate that they may see themselves as confident, talented, beautiful, or even strong, which are characteristics that could be attributed to Beyoncé and Nicki Minaj. In fact, both participants state in the interview that they see themselves as being strong women. Moving to the data we collected during our interviews, we found that our participants do not necessarily identify themselves through simultaneous speech, despite the fact that this is part of their daily lives and that it occurred in their speech during the interview. Instead, they looked at different aspects of themselves, such as gender. When asked to describe their own self-image, they highlighted their gender and took pride in being strong women. Nicki Minaj says proudly that, "I am a woman. I am a strong woman." Beyoncé quickly agrees with her and adds on different parts of her own personality, saying that she is funny and outgoing. Their responses were reminiscent of what Grace Evans wanted at the end of her article, "Those loud black girls," when she states that, and I quote, "And it gladdens me to see that despite the attempts to silence them, they are growing into loud, proud black women," end quote. Even though they do not outright say anything about their race, it was easy to see they took pride in being strong black women. As the conversation continued on, it seemed as if these women, without really knowing it, were using Afrocentric feminist epistemology. Collins writes that Afrocentric feminist epistemology is, and I quote, "the act of being simultaneously a member of a group and yet standing apart from it," end quote. The women knew without a doubt that they are part of the African American community, yet it is not what completely defines them as a person. Part of the Afrocentric feminist epistemology is using concrete personal knowledge when getting a point across. Both women do so throughout the conversation. Nicki Minaj often refers back to the point that she is a female waitress, especially concerning her use of simultaneous speech, while Beyoncé talks about being a mother and interacting with her husband and children. The women are also a part of third-wave feminism. Lita Salidi quotes Mills saying that third-wave feminism, and I quote, "is concerned with the diversity, multiplicity, performativity, and co-construction of gender identities within specific contexts and communities of practice," end quote. Our participants clearly are part of this movement, with their overwhelming pride in their gender and also their community. These are women who, even though they may not realize it, are breaking the barriers of stereotypes and judgments simply for being strong, independent black women. Moving to the idea of simultaneous speech, both the participants agreed that they hear simultaneous speech where they work. Being waitresses, their job requires them to be talkative. This sets up perfect opportunities for simultaneous speech. Nicki Minaj says about servers, "We're blunt. It's easy to get overly emotional and overly excited and start talking over somebody." And simultaneous speech was maybe just a little egotistical. They also state that it is important that they only use simultaneous speech with people they are comfortable with and must have respect for those people, their mothers, friends, and family members. Beyoncé notes that she engages in simultaneous speech frequently at home with her husband and children. Both participants agreed that this level of comfort is crucial. If you engage in simultaneous speech with a stranger, it may come off as rude. Not only must there be a level of comfortability, but also a certain time and place that is appropriate to engage in simultaneous speech. Going back, it is important to see that both participants see politeness as being a key aspect of engaging in simultaneous speech. Our participants also mentioned that politeness is a large part of their identity. Being waitresses, they often encounter not only rude customers, but overly polite ones. For example, Nicki Minaj states that she often waits on customers that are overly polite and say thank you way too much. She comments that she does not want to say, "You're welcome," every time someone says thank you to her. She jokingly laughed that it was way too much effort on her part. Mills comments that, and I quote, "Women's self-effacing behavior, that is, over-politeness, can often lead to some groups of women being disadvantaged," end quote. In Nicki Minaj's case, it is a disadvantage to the other women to be over-polite because it will not gain them acceptance and favor, but rather only annoyance. Although Mills is gender-specific, it is not unreasonable to think males also act this way in certain situations, such as a restaurant. On the other hand, Beyoncé said that a customer once threw a coupon at her because it had expired and told her to just get it out of here. However, Both women stated that it is not just your words that can be seen as impolite or polite, but that certain bodily acts, such as an eye roll, a hand gesture, or even a lip smack, could be seen as impolite, while a smile and the tone of your voice shows politeness and respect. Nicki Minaj says that she probably makes my voice higher when talking to an elder, in contrast to her normal voice when talking to a peer. She commented that she was unsure why she did this, but she thought it could be so it would keep the elderly calm. An interesting point was the different views on what was considered polite to call an older female. Nicki Minaj was taught that every elder female was a miss, while Beyoncé has always been told to call her elder females ma'am. Perhaps they have different thoughts on respect because of the different locations the two of them grow up, and/or their family history. In our interview, we also referenced the idea of talking like a black woman. Certain language was one of the key ways our participants considered one would talk like a black woman. Words such as ain't or calling shrimp scrimp were typical ways they viewed how female African Americans spoke. They also stated that many women do not use proper English when they speak as they would as a black woman. Although words are important to the way the female African American community talks, the way they say their words are equally as important. Attitudes are stereotypically a way for most people to think of a female African American when they speak. Beyoncé inserted that despite the fact that many women do talk with attitude, it's not always meant to come off that way. Not only was language a key factor in talking like a black woman, but also the way they act, such as eye-rolling and clicking tongues, which they previously stated could be seen as rude. The participants felt that there was a certain way to talk black or ghetto, not speaking properly, or like you don't have a proper education are ways they considered speaking ghetto. Along with those things, the women commented that speaking ghetto involved not having good grammar. Interestingly, our participants said that although they speak properly, if they are angry or excited, they may revert to speaking ghetto. As our participants listed off items that would be considered talking ghetto, we noticed that there was a lot of overlap with the way they considered talking like a black woman to be, such as attitudes, tongue clicking, and speaking poorly. Perhaps they see the two different speech patterns as related, if not one and the same. Grace Evans writes that, and I quote, "Price is paid by the recipient of an education, and this is the personal cost of the process of deculturalization, de-Africanization, whereby all personal expressions of one's original African culture are eliminated and European codes established instead. The mastery of standard English to replace West Indian patois is only one aspect of this transformation. It includes training the body to adapt European body language and gesture, and the voice to adopt European tones of speech and nonverbal expression. Loudness is discouraged as it reflects field life and rural peasant status. Perhaps speaking ghetto is a way to retain African American culture during a time when people wanted it wiped out from the world, and has since carried over in today's society. It is possible that by speaking ghetto, people are keeping their culture alive." Both women also made it clear, much like simultaneous speech, that there was a time and place for speaking ghetto, and around certain people it was also alright to do so. Another thing we picked up from our interview process is the idea of positive affirmation. The two seem to possess a similar train of thought, often affirming the other's response. The interview contains many utterances of right, exactly, and yeah, and or yup. The two fed off each other's responses. We noticed that the two engaged in simultaneous speech when what the other one had said struck a nerve with them, so to speak. If they became excited or were reminded of an instance or scenario, they would then try to get their thought out so as to contribute to propel the conversation. It was as if they were going to say the other would be able to relate to. At some points in the interview, the two participants uttered the same utterance at the exact same time. From the information we gathered from these interviews, we noticed that topic development was also a key part in determining one's identity and constructing their identity. According to Jennifer Coates, conversations tend to follow a specific framework. It starts with the topic introduction and is followed by a response from a different individual. That same person will then give up the conversational floor either back to the original speaker or to another member of the conversation, or proceed to tell an anecdote relating to the original theme. When the anecdote is over, general discussion is started, connecting the first speaker's topic to the second anecdote. Once this is completed, a summary of the discussion is provided, and then the original speaker who presented the topic gets the last word. Within this framework that Coates suggests, it is also important to notice the other minor details of topic development. I will start with minimal responses. During the interview we conducted, we found that minimal responses were also incorporated into the framework. Coates referenced this as simply offering positive feedback to encourage the speaker to continue. These minimal responses are more than just positive affirmation as mentioned earlier. They also include the ideas of finishing each other's sentences as a form of simultaneous speech. Our participants did this often, however, when they did it, it was never done in a way that overpowered and took the conversational floor away from the speaker. Minimal responses can often escalate to become true simultaneous speech. Using our interview as an example, the simultaneous speech, as mentioned earlier, was only used during periods of high emotion and excitement. Coates never references emotion as being a primary cause of simultaneous speech, but rather says that during discussion-type conversations it is sometimes necessary to progress a topic. The last subcategory of topic development I will reference is the idea of informal features. Our participants followed pretty closely to Evan's articles in the sense that they were being loud black girls. Their conversations between each other were casual and relaxed, meaning that they weren't concerned with proper English. Words were shortened and slang was used to make the act of speaking more natural and create flow in the conversation. The focus was not on the precision of their words, but rather the comfort levels of each participant during the interview and discussion. In conclusion, it seems to us that our participants do construct identity through simultaneous speech, but perhaps more so through gender and politeness. In some instances, however, the participants considered the use of simultaneous speech to be rude, perhaps being a synonym for impolite. So the two are interconnected. Overall, we see our participants as constructing their identities through different sociolinguistic frames. For example, since we are outsiders of the indigenous group, they may construct identity differently with members of their own group, as mentioned in Scott's article. The data we have collected, therefore, can by no means be taken as a generalization. Contextual aspects such as setting and other potential speech participants will always be relevant in constructing identity. Upon completing our research and presentation, we want to leave you with questions to think about or discussion if time permits. How does location affect discourse? How does occupation affect discourse? And how does age affect discourse?